Hi everyone, it's Jim of Shiloh Hall, and I just want to see if I can quickly offer some information concerning whether or not the resurrection occurred first thing on the Sabbath or at the ninth hour or around 3 p.m. on the Sabbath. To understand the question or the reason for the question, I think one must understand that the vast majority of translations are telling us that Mary Magdalene and the other Marys came to the tomb on the first day of the week, the vast majority. But the Greek actually reads that they came very early on one of the Sabbaths. And when they got to the tomb, in all four of the gospel translations, they found the tomb empty already by the time they got there. Well, if you embrace that they came on the first day of the week, then it doesn't really matter what time or when it was. I mean, it does matter, but any time on the Sabbath would work because they discover him gone, him resurrected on the first day of the week. If, however, they are approach the tomb early on the Sabbath and find him risen, then you can't have a 3 p.m. You can't have a later in the afternoon resurrection if he's already resurrected. So let me see if I can explain. So here are the Greek words that are driving this conversation. Here's the Greek, and here's the transliteration of that Greek. It's mia ton sabbaton, which is translated literally one, the Sabbaths. Mia is translated as one. The word means one, a primary number, and it's translated that way. I'm going to say 282 times as exactly one, and then more than 300 times it's translated as a variant of one, some form of one. Only 9 times throughout all scripture is it translated as first. And 7 of those times are in concert with the word sabbaton, as this phrase does. And 6 of those particular passages are all of these resurrection passages of the four Gospels. So let me finish here. Mia is literally one, and sabbaton is literally Sabbath. Only 9 times is it translated week, and 7 of those times are in concert with this phraseology, Mia, and 6 of those times are right here in the gospel accounts, the combined gospel accounts. And here are the 6. Well, there are only 5 here. One, because I left 2019 out of this conversation because it doesn't really um, have to do with the resurrection. But pretty much, John 20:19 also says, it's talking about a little later in that day on the Sabbath when Mary Magdalene came to them where they were gathered together on that same Sabbath, we'll see that word. But I didn't include it here because that's not part of the resurrection discussion. But here are the passages in question that have to do with the resurrection. Matthew 28:1, Matthew 16:2, I'm sorry, Matthew 28:1, Mark 16:2, Mark 16:9, Luke 24, and Luke 21. Let's go look at these quickly on Bible Hub if I can. So here I'm starting at Matthew 21. And what we'll see here, and I'm going to go through this quickly because I've done it on other videos. We look at the NASB and how they have translated the Greek here. Here's your Greek. Here's the original Greek, and then here's the transliteration of the Greek. Here's your sabbaton, but here's the Greek for sabbaton. And then here is mian and sabbaton together. So these are the words in question. But here's how the NASB has chosen to render this. Now, after the Sabbath, so here they're translating sabbaton over here as Sabbath correctly, as it began to dawn toward the first, and now they've put first day of the week. But the Greek is mian sabbaton. And over here, Strong's tells us what that literally means, one of the Sabbaths. So while they're telling us, while the NASB and the vast majority of translations are telling us that as it began to dawn toward the first day of the week, the literal translation should be as it began to dawn on one of the Sabbaths. And I'll just quickly show you here what Strong's does. I mean, Strong's enters into it because they start giving you some, in the Strong's lexicon here, they start giving you here, this is the same translation where they're adding the and day here for mean, but then they go on to show you that it's one, a primary numeral, one. So even though they are telling you that this word means one and it's a primary numeral one, they're still giving you the translation up here of the first day. And then where they're telling you that the following word is sabbaton and it means the Sabbath, they do show you a week here, but they're showing you that the common translation is the Sabbath. So while they're acknowledging, I'm not going to do this every time because this is what, for each of the passages I'm going to show you, because this is what they do every time. But basically, Strong's is entering into the conversation where, and I don't know, at this point, I'd be called a conspiracy theorist if I started speculating as to why the modern translations, the vast majority of them, are leading us down this path when the Greek seems so clear. So I'm going to stay out of that. We're not going to talk about that. Let's move on to Mark 16:2. And it's the very same thing where the NASB is telling us very early on the first day of the week. The actual Greek here is Mia Sabbaton, one of the Sabbaths. So where it says very early on the first day of the week in the NASB, it should be very early on one of the Sabbaths. In Mark 16:9, when we are looking at this one's a little bit different because, well, let me show you how it reads here. Now, after he had risen early on the first day of the week, that's how they had chosen to render this. But the actual Greek is not saying that way. The Greek is saying early, that's early. Proti. Instead of saying mia or mien, it's saying proti, which literally is a first chief. If you get into that word a little more, let me go into the Strong's here for that word. When you get into proti, it's first, before, principal, most important. It's a contracted superlative of foremost. So the concept here isn't one, it's first. It literally is first in the concept of being the most important, the chiefest thing, the foremost thing of the day. So what it would really be, and then they follow it up with sabbato. So what it would really be is where NASB is translating this as now after he had risen early on the first day of the week, it really should read now after he had risen, the very first thing, the foremost thing on the Sabbath. So after he had risen, the foremost thing on the Sabbath is what 16:9 is telling us. Again, so the modern translations are telling us first day of the week, and the Greek is telling us we're talking about the Sabbath, and everything's early on the Sabbath. This is him rising very first thing on the Sabbath. Mary and the other Marys came at dawn on the Sabbath in Mark 16:2 and in Matthew 28:1. So then we move to Luke 24:1, and it's the same thing. Here's the NASB. But on the first day of the week at early dawn, but over here it's in Greek, it's Mia Sabbaton. It should read one of the Sabbaths at early dawn. One of the Sabbaths at early dawn, but they've translated it as first of the week. And here is Mia Sabbaton, one of the Sabbaths. Let's go to John 20. And it reads in the NASB, which is representative of all the vast majority of modern translations, now on the first day of the week, but the actual Greek is Mia Sabbaton. And so it should read now, one Sabbath, Mary Magdalene came early to the tomb while it was still dark, or while there was yet darkness. So again, we've got Matthew 21 in the gospel telling us Mary's coming early on one of the Sabbaths. You got Mark 16:2 telling us that Mary's coming early on one of the Sabbaths, and that he had risen first thing, foremost, in 16:9 on that same Sabbath. We got Luke 24:1 telling us that he came first thing, or that they came first thing on the Sabbath. And we have John early, I'm sure I should say early, that Mary came early on the Sabbath. And then we have John 20 1, telling us that Mary came early on one of the Sabbaths while it was still dark. So let me show you this and summarize it one more time before I move on to the timeline. So here is, and I've got Miaton, tone, sabbaton, but it's also Mian sabbaton, or they've got a few variations on it, but it's always some version of one and Sabbath that's in question. And here's Matthew 28, 1. And all of these renderings I'm going to give you of the 5 gospel passages in question, I'm going to go ahead and just insert the words on one of the Sabbaths. And you can decide if that's if it's just a, if it's a reasonable thing to do, if it's justified or not. You can decide. And then you can interpret as you need to. If you're interested in the subject of when he resurrected, you can interpret when what the scriptures are telling us here. So Matthew 28, 1 reads, "As it began to dawn toward one of the Sabbaths, Mary Magdalene came." Mark 16, 2, "And very early on one of the Sabbaths they came to the tomb when the sun had risen." Mark 16, 9, "Having risen foremost, the foremost thing on the Sabbath, he appeared first to Mary." Luke 24, "But on one of the Sabbaths at early dawn they came to the tomb bringing the spices." And John 21, "Now one Sabbath Mary Magdalene came early to the tomb while there was still darkness." And in all of these occasions, in every one of these accounts, what Mary discovered, what the Marys discovered, was that he was no longer there. The stone had been rolled away and he had been risen. They met with a messenger who told them that the one you're looking for is gone. So by the time they're getting there early on a Sabbath, he's gone. And so for those who are holding to a 3 p.m. Sabbath or a resurrection because of when he was crucified and when he actually died at the 9th hour, if you're holding to that, okay, but these are the passages that are standing in contradiction to that and making that 3 p.m. or 9th hour resurrection really not viable if this is a correct translation. So let's go to the timelines. Well, actually, before I go to the timelines, I do want to just quickly point out here that he appeared first to Mary. See, there's a literal word, this proton, this word proton. If I understand it correctly, I'm not the guy to really know, but I've heard this many, many times that this is the word that is literally should be translated first, where Mia or Mian is being translated as first, only 9 out of 300 and some odd times where it was translated first. There is a literal Greek word for the word first, and it's proton, not Mian. So, all right. For those who haven't seen this timeline, I pulled this out quite a bit, and I've cleaned it up and prepared it a little bit for this conversation. But let me explain what I can here. I have forgive me. I have 2 timelines here, but one represents an evening to evening illustration of the day, where the day starts at evening, sundown, which is usually around 6 p.m. And there's that is the majority of people, because this is what they've been taught, this is what they hold on to. But I contend that we've got that the true Hebrew calendar day runs from sunrise to sunrise, and everybody's got to make their they're going to have to decide which argument is making the most sense to them and the best case. In which case, just I'm good with that. If you are going to evaluate the information, do with the information what you need to. But I embrace morning to morning. Actually, morning to morning is a misnomer. It should be sunrise to sunrise. But that's what I embrace. So I'm going to show that first, and then I'm going to come back to show the evening to evening illustration. But let's talk about the crucifixion week. First of all, on the 14th day, which would be called the day of preparation, it's time for them. They've been keeping the lamb, and they need to know they've got to begin preparing it, because here at sunset, the lamb's got to be slaughtered for the Passover meal. So they come to Yahushua, which is Jesus, and ask him, how do you want us to prepare? What do you want us to do? And he gives them the instructions to go into town and meet somebody and prepare the room. And they followed it. They found it exactly as he said it was, and they followed those instructions. So they went off and they spent this day preparing the room and getting things ready. And then come nighttime, come evening, not nighttime, but evening, when the sun goes down, they are killing the lamb, slaughtering it, roasting it with bitter herbs, and then they begin to, you know, then they are to eat that same night, they are to eat that lamb roasted with bitter herbs alongside of unleavened bread. So when we show then, once they have prepared the lamb and Yahushua starts coming and reclining and they start talking about sitting down, basically sitting down to this meal, this is what's taking place. It's time. The sun has gone down. We are now at nighttime. It is, evening is past and we are ready to begin eating the Passover meal, which is exactly what Yahushua says, I long to have this Passover meal, etc., etc. Well, they finish this Passover meal, and then they go off into the Garden of Gethsemane, where Yahushua goes off by himself to pray, commands all the apostles to stay awake and wait for him, but comes back, keeps finding them asleep. But this is taking place this night on the 14th. It's still the 14th. If you're going with a sunrise to sunrise day, it's still the 14th. But he's there for a while, and then at some point here later in this same night, the guards of the chief priests, they come to arrest him and they take him away. And this is still on the 14th. They carry him off to Caiaphas and the chief priests and the different things who do the things they've got to do, and then they are moving him off to Pilate very early in the morning. And as the sun is rising, we're moving to the 15th day. Okay. But no matter what, whether it's 14th or 15th day, because you're going to see that at this point, it really doesn't matter, whether you are going evening to evening or morning to morning. It's still going to be the 15th day that these events happen to him that I'm getting ready to describe. So he shows up. Pilate questions him, finds out that he's from Galilee, and sends him off to Herod to let Herod deal with it, and Herod sends him right back. Well, all of this stuff is happening between sunup and the third hour, because by the time of the third hour, he's been flogged. He's gone through all the things that we read about taking place between him and Pilate, etc. He's gone through all of that. And Pilate has turned him over. He's been flogged. We've carried the cross up to, the hill of the skull or whatever that was called. They've carried it up, and now they are crucifying him at the third hour. He's being crucified at the third hour. That's how that's described. But we would, because it's similar, we would say 9 a.m., but that's not, we don't really know if it was 9 a.m. or something else. Sorry, that's a pretty bad 9 a.m., but you get the idea. Well, then we know that 3 hours later, at the 6th hour, we have darkness coming over the land. And then 3 hours later, at the 9th hour, he dies. He dies here at the 9th hour. This is it. And then we know from Yahushua says, as Jonah was in the belly 3 days and 3 nights, so the Son of Man shall be in the heart of the earth for 3 days and 3 nights. So everybody knows we need 3 days and 3 nights. Now, I will tell you here, before we revisit it again, the question is, how do you measure those days? If we're talking about a full day and then we're defining that full day as a 24-hour period of day, then we would need 24 hours of day times 3 and 24 hours of night times 3. But, and I think, and I've always embraced it because I've had no reason not to. And as long as we're as long as Mary's showing up on the first day of the week, it really doesn't matter what time he resurrects. Or that we hold on to that position because it fits. If you're going to have them all showing up on the first day of the week instead of the first day of the Sabbath. So, but let's just acknowledge that we have a 9th hour. I'm sorry, that's terrible. 9th hour. Huh. The 9th hour, or that's 3 p.m. And if you want to carry a full 24 hours, you're going to have to come to here to get the first 24-hour period. And then the sum total of this daylight time that he's in Sheol and this daylight time would be 24 hours of sunlight. And then we have, 12 hours of sunlight with 12 hours of darkness. So that would make a first full 24 hours. And then we would have this combined with this over here to make the full day. But we're basically going to have a 3 hours of the day-ish, then the night, and then 9 hours of the day here-ish. And that's going to get us our second full day. And then we're going to have 3 hours of the day again, 12 hours of night, and then 9 hours of the day. And that gets us to the 18th day, which is our Saturday, which is also our seventh day of the week. And then this is what gets us to our 9th hour resurrection. Well, okay. But the passages in question, if the passages in question, Matthew 28:1, Mark 16:2, Luke 24:1, and John 21, if all of those are truly and correctly to be rendered and translated, that Mary and the Marys showed up early on the day, on this first day of the week, which would have been the 19th day on the Hebrew calendar, well, on the Enoch calendar, the Zadokian calendar, this would be the first day of the week. Well, if they're showing up, if they're showing up here at this period of time after the night has gone, whether it's, we have questions about how dawn and works and all that and sunrise, but if this is the period of time that they're showing up, yeah, it works that he was resurrected here. And so all the translations that are showing us the first day of the week, all of this works. But if the Greek is correct, if what I'm saying about the Greek is correct, and mia ton sabbaton or mian sabbaton actually means that they were coming on the first, early on the Sabbath, that would be day 7, then they were coming here. This is the time frame in which they were coming. And when they came here, first thing on that 7th day, first thing on day 18, first thing on Sabbath, he was already gone. And if he was already gone, if he was already resurrected, you don't have this last period of daylight here. You just wouldn't have it because he's already resurrected. I mean, you have the last period of daylight, but not with him still in the ground. And so then what are we left here? We can reject the idea that the Greek that we're seeing, or that what I'm seeing is, you can reject that that's right. You can just go right back to the first day of the week and just stay with your explanation. But if you're going to agree with me and sabbaton or miaton sabbaton, that when they were showing up here on this Sabbath, on one of the first thing on one of the Sabbaths, and he's already risen, then really you cannot have the 9th-hour resurrection. It's already happened. And so then you have to relook at the passage about Jonah being in and Yahushua's command, statement that is, as Jonah was in the belly of the whale for 3 days and 3 nights. Well, first of all, are we talking about a 24-hour day? Are we talking about a 12-hour day? Are we talking about when we say full, was he even talking about a full day? Do we really even know how Jonah was in there? Was Jonah in for 36, what would that be? 72 hours? Is that right? 24, 24, and 24? Yeah. 72 straight hours? Was he already there? Or was it some variation of that? So my real question with that is, the fact we do have day here. This would be potentially be day 1. This would be day 2, and this would be day 3. And I've also say there's a passage saying that he was risen on the 3rd day, which also makes sense because this would be 1, 2, 3 on the 3rd day, I suppose. But you have 1 day here, 2 days here, 3 days here, and then you have 1 night here, 2 nights here, and 3 nights here. Is that the explanation? I don't really know, and I'm not trying to assert anything in particular, but I would say that from what I'm reading, that almost has to be. I am implying from the scriptures that it must be that, because we know he died at the 9th hour. Nobody questions that. What we question is whether or not the Marys were showing up on the first day of the week, or if they were showing up on early on one of the Sabbaths. Because if they were showing up on one of the Sabbaths early, then you can't have a ninth hour resurrection. You have to have a resurrection that precedes that, and you will not have a full 3 days. You will not have, three 12-hour, 36 hours of day plus 36 hours of night exactly for his resurrection. It would be, what would that be? It would be more like 12, 12, 24, 27, 28 hours of day and 36 hours of night. Now, let's look at this from the perspective of evening to evening, because there are many people who embrace this. Well, if you're embracing this, then what's happening? We've come to the day of preparation, day 4, and they've slept through the first half of day 14, and they're getting up on the second half of day 14, and they're coming to Yahushua to say, "Hey, how do you want us to prepare?" And he gives them the instructions, and they go off and they do it, and they prepare. But I would tell you, then, if they're preparing at evening, as the Levitical instructions and Exodus instructions say, then they're preparing on day 15. It's a bit of a problem for me. But if they prepare the day before the evening goes down, okay, they're still preparing on the 14th, but then they're not killing the lamb at twilight or killing the lamb at evening. We have issues there, but that's not the subject of this video. But then they would have them still, then, no matter what, they would have them eating the Passover meal here. Now they're saying it's the 15th and not the 14th now. And then they would have the Garden of Gethsemane events in the middle of the night on the 15th. And then they would have him being arrested and taken off to Caiaphas and the chief priests, etc. here. And then we're going to have the wee hours of the morning, and the wee hours. And then he's going to be taken off to Pilate to go through everything that Pilate has suggested, or not suggested. I'm sorry, everything that went through with what happened with Pilate, and then we still have him being placed on the cross at the 3rd hour, with the darkness in the 12th hour, or the 6th hour. I'm sorry, at noon, and then him dying at the 9th hour on this day. Well, in either case, we're still, because whether you go evening to evening, you're on the 15th night before, but even down here, you're still going to be on the 15th, because now you've crossed the day. No matter whether you embrace evening to evening or sunrise to sunrise, no matter what, he's being crucified on the 15th day, which would definitely be identified as the first day of unleavened bread, as I've said here and here. This is the first day of unleavened bread. This is the high Shabbat, when it says in Matthew and when it says in Mark that now after the Shabbat, they're talking about after this Shabbat. This is what they call a high Sabbath or Shabbat, where we've started the Feast of Unleavened Bread on day 15, and it's a Sabbath. And whether you embrace evening to evening or sunrise to sunrise, we're on day 15 when he's being crucified. So then you would still have the day count here. Let's take this to, it would be the first day occurring. Here would be the first night. Here would be the second day, the second night. Here would be the third day. And here would be the third night. And now, because you've gone evening to evening, by the time night has started here, you have started your Sabbath. Here's your Saturday. You've started it. By the time, and this is our weekly Sabbath. This is one of the Sabbaths. This is why in Matthew 28 it says, now after the Sabbath, on one of the Sabbaths, because this is one of the weekly Sabbaths here. So after the high Sabbath and on one of the Sabbaths is what they're talking about. Well, if you have gone into the night, and with evening, you've gone into your celebration. You are now observing your Sabbath at evening. You're in it now. So they're getting up and they're approaching here on this Sabbath, and they would still be, now it wouldn't be the beginning of the Sabbath. It wouldn't be because you'd be right in the middle of the Sabbath. You'd be approaching the daylight hours of the Sabbath when the sun comes up, I guess. But then this would still be your 9th hour here. So you could still run your 12 hours to here, and 24 hours to here, and then your 24 hours to here, and then your 24 hours to here, and make this work. And you would still be he would still be getting risen on the 18th day, or on the 7th day of the week, or on Saturday on the Sabbath at the 9th hour. Now, it still works if you're going to embrace that they were coming early on the first day of the week, which puts you at the 19th, because that has the Mary's coming on the first day of the week. So the 9th hour on this Sabbath still works, because it's a whole at least 12 hours, 15 hours, 18 hours later that they're trying to come. And this is where, if you're embracing the first day of the week translations, this is where they're discovering the tomb empty. And all of this, all of these explanations that have them risen by that time work. So basically, they have him risen here at the 9th hour, and a good distance before he's being discovered the first day of the week. Now, if they were coming, though, still, even in an evening to evening illustration, if they're coming first thing in the morning at sunrise toward dawn on one of the Sabbaths, if that's what they're doing, then it's too early. He will have been risen, because when they came, they're risen, and you still can't get to the 3rd hour. So you have the same problem whether you are going evening to evening or morning to morning. If you're trying to get the resurrection to the 9th hour, or 3 p.m. on the Sabbath, so that you can get your full 3 days, okay, but then you cannot really embrace, you would have a hard time embracing, I don't know how you would embrace the Greek that says that the Marys are showing up early on one of the Sabbaths. You must then go back and embrace all the vast majority of translations that are saying first day of the week. Now, I've heard, and I can't agree with it. I would not go along with it, but I've heard some people say, "Yeah, I know, I see meaton, sabbaton, but all these people that have been translating this word all this time, I'm gonna defer to them rather than to someone like this guy out on a YouTube video showing us meaton, sabbaton." Well, you can do that if you want. You can defer to the translations that have given us, and all the work that has given us these vast numbers of translations, saying that out of the 300 plus times meon is translated as one, for these 9 times, 6 of which are related to the resurrection. When you get into the whole study of it, I don't know how you wouldn't question how we ever came to first day of the week in these translations. And it's hard not to sound like a conspiracy theorist when you start getting into it. But I adhere to the idea that, this truly is this world, this cosmos, the systems that we're in, all of them, including the systems that Christianity has been absorbed into. These belong to our Satan, our adversary, the devil. He's the god of this world. And so he's working against us and not for us. And some of, if we're not careful, the translations that we are getting could be working against us and not for us. Just food for thought. You guys do with that as you will. All right, I think I finished up here. If you think I'm correct, if you think that I'm onto something here, then please like and share so that others have a chance to hear what I'm sharing and to enter the discussion here. All right, well, thank you, and may you be Baruch.